Morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, LinkedIn Live. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Advita.
Morning, Cheryl. Morning, everyone.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. I don't know, because you say you've used StreamYard quite a lot. Have you noticed there's been a bit of a delay kind of connecting with LinkedIn sort of in the
Yeah,
last couple of months? Have you noticed
yeah,
that? Yeah.
there is. I always do a countdown, like a music countdown,
Ah, I did
to give
think about
myself.
doing that. Do you have like sort of funky music playing in the
Yeah,
background or just like
yeah,
stuff?
yeah. I went over the top, Cheryl. I'm
Yeah,
a
I
bit
don't
extra with everything.
don't blame you. Good morning, everyone. If you are joining us live on this sunny Friday morning, I've even caught the sun from like walking out the last few mornings because it's been so bright and sunny. If you're joining us live, please do say good morning in the chat. I've got the amazing Advita Patel, who I will introduce in a sec. So if you're joining us live, please say good morning. Let us know how the weather is if you're in the sunny UK. Let us know how your week has been, maybe. We're going to be talking about comms and PR and how organizations deal with, for example, issues when things hit the fan, when there's stuff going on in the world, which there always is. Sometimes it feels like the world is on fire. Advita's the expert in everything when it comes to that. So good morning if you are joining us live, and if you're watching us on the replay, thank you for taking out a bit of your time. So it's Friday morning. I've got Advita Patel with me. Advita, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for asking me. I'm looking forward to
For those that don't know Advita Patel, Advita is the founder of CommsRebel, as you can see by that amazing uh, LED sign in the background. I'm going to have to ask about that in terms of where the lightning bolt, the kind of like the voltage thing. What was the inspiration for that? She's an expert at transforming workplace culture through innovative internal comm strategies. Co-founder of A Leader Like Me, Calm Edged Rebels, coaching retreats, podcast, broadcaster, streamer, YouTuber, and author as well. So you co-wrote the book Building a Culture of Inclusivity. And on top of all of that, I mean, to be honest, your bio was so long, ChatGPT almost couldn't deal with it in terms of creating an introduction for you. Right? There's so much in there. But on top of all of that, you also in 2025 you became president of the Chartered Institute of Public Relations. Congratulations, Rita.
Thank
And thank
you.
you for joining us.
Well, thank you for asking me. Yeah, as you can tell, I like to live a vibrant life. I like to keep busy.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And tell us about the sign and the is it a lightning bolt or is it a volt? Is
Lightning
it, well,
bolt.
it's the same thing, right?
Lightning
Lightning
bolt.
bolt.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny because I spent so much of my life conforming and following
Mm,
the rules and guidelines to belong. To be honest, to fit in and to belong and
right.
not rock the boat too much. My parents, when you're an underrepresented person or a person of color growing up in an environment where you're the only one, and you're told frequently
Yeah.
you don't belong, you do everything in your power, right, to belong and to feel
Yeah.
included. And so I followed the rules. I followed my parents who told me,
Hmm.
don't rock the boat, Advita. Keep your head down. Don't make a scene. I need you to study hard and work hard. And, we've come over here to give you and your sister a better life. And that's what I
Right.
did for the majority of my childhood and all through my
Yeah.
teenage and adulthood. And then I got to a point in my career where I was like, no, enough is enough. It's time to
Right.
take control. I'd lost my identity. I didn't know who I was anymore. I'd spent
Hmm.
a lot of my time seeking validation, finding permission before I did anything.
Mm,
I felt I was good enough. My confidence was spiraling. And then one day
right.
I was like, nope, time to take control. And over a period of time, while trying to understand the world of confidence, self esteem, what does
Yeah.
that mean for people like us? Um, I had a great coach who gave me a bit of a push in the direction and said, tell me something that's a little bit different about you. And
Okay.
that's where CommsRebel came from. Because I said, Einstein says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting to see change. And
Yeah.
that's what for organizations, that we're trying to do same thing. We're doing the same thing over and over again and expect to see something different. And
Yeah.
in fact, we need to be bold and revolutionary and make some brave choices if we want to see something.
Absolutely.
And that's
I
where
love
comms
that. And so the lightning bolt is because
it's about that the kind of shock and the revolution and changing the scene, right? So if you think about lightning in the sky, how it lights up and how it can, but then it can strike at the right moment, and that's
love
what that's
it.
about, giving the
Love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely love it. And we've got our first good morning. Well, I say good morning in the style that only Junior Beeman could. So I'd love to do this. If I could hear everybody live, I would do it. So it'd be when I say fry, you say yay. Fry.
Yay!
Fry. Junior, you actually got us to do it. How weird is that? Junior Beeman there, who's also a coach actually. So it's interesting you were talking about coaching and the impact that had on you in terms of maybe just getting you to see that you were more than, I guess, what you were being told you were, and kind of stepping into your power, as they say, right? One of those things.
Self-belief and self-worth is so vital to our own well-being and mental health when we're going through challenging and difficult circumstances.
Absolutely. Perfect. And how did you get into internal comms? Just tell me a bit about that.
By complete fluke, to be honest with you. I actually studied information tech when I first did my degree, because I love technology. I remember my dad bringing home a PC, and I loved the fact this amazing device could connect us to so many different people and things. So I studied IT. When I graduated, there was a massive dot-com crash. So they weren't hiring people. Well, definitely weren't hiring women, and they definitely weren't hiring women of color anyway at that time. So I ended up doing an administrative role, trying to figure out my life. And I started a master's in human resources, but then I was mentored by a marketing officer, a manager, Catherine, who gave me a push into changing it to strategic marketing. And then the first job I applied for was tagged as a marketing officer, but actually it was internal comms. And that was my first foray into internal comms about 18 years ago. And that's when I started and I've meddled in other communication disciplines like public relations and media relations and a little bit of public affairs stuff, but internal comms has always been my love. I love everything about it.
It's really interesting. Internal comms, for anybody that's listening, one of the things I always remember about internal comms, whenever it came to like surveys or anything like that, people would always be like, there's not enough communication. We didn't, there's just always that narrative right around internal comms. But internal comms is a really powerful tool when it comes to, well, everything really, but employee engagement, change, strategy, almost like for the culture of the organization. Like internal comms plays a really important part, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's a cog. It makes things turn round, turn over, turn round. You know what I mean? The cog, the machine.
Yeah.
It's about making sure that we connect the leadership objectives of what they want to deliver and how their colleagues and employees are feeling and what they're hearing, and kind of putting the two together and making sure that our colleagues feel valued, they feel heard, they feel connected. And they feel that they can bring whoever they need to bring to do their best work to help the organization thrive. And it's connecting those dots, basically.
Absolutely. And Junior's jumping on the lightning bolt bandwagon already. Loving to hear the power of mentorship and coaching already. Both also light up the sky for us. Very, very true. Interesting. So that's another way of looking at it in terms of the lightning bolt. And with the comms, and we're going to get onto internal and external comms as well, because obviously your background is public relations, but with the comms, and as you were talking there's something about, there's a real positive, there's a real, there's a real benefit to using comms in a really positive way, and it can have such a massive positive impact. It can also have a really negative impact, whether that be internal or external, based on how people are phrased, or if somebody said the wrong thing, or something gets leaked and it's wrong, or somebody's used the wrong phrase or the wrong language. So just tell us about maybe why internal and external comms are so important when it comes to inclusion and making everybody feel as though they are part of the organization, and that the organization cares about inclusion.
A great question. The thing with inclusion, it isn't something you can just bolt on to a policy or a campaign. It has to be woven into how we communicate every day. It's everyday moments. You just can't just slap it on a fancy EDI statement and say this, we're inclusive. And that implies that's internally and externally, as you said, Cheryl.
Yeah.
Internal comms, I see it as creating the conditions of how people are seen, how they feel safe, how they feel valued, as I said. And it's how we build trust and how we shape the culture. Because if we don't have trust in our organization and our colleagues don't trust us, then it's broken completely. And like you said, people are not going to speak up. They're not going to be able to share their thoughts, ideas. They won't be performing. We'll see absence. It'll be not a great culture and be very toxic. The external comms side, on the other hand, external comms reflect who we are and what we stand for, right? So our communication to our communities, our customers, our clients. And when both align authentically and with genuine connection, they reinforce each other. So it shows that we're not just talking the talk, but we're also walking and we're practicing preaching. And that's when inclusion moves from intention to impact. And that's what I always say, that both have to marry and both have to work. Because you see outside in clients, this whole greatness. So look how great we are. We're so wonderful. Come and work. We're brilliant. As soon as you cross the threshold and into the world of that organization, completely different.
Absolutely.
Trust is depleted immediately because you're like, hang on, you told me this incredibly glossy magazine of how fabulous you are, and now I'm here and it's not, and you've lost that trust immediately.
It's a bit like the whole, it reminded me of we use terms like, say, greenwashing or diversity washing or what. It's a bit like that, isn't it? I remember an organization who shall remain nameless saying to me that they thought that they needed some help with their website because they were trying to pitch for work and they weren't coming across as inclusive enough, right? So they were saying to me, oh, can you give us some tips on our website? And I was like, hang on a minute, your website is just your shop window, right? So never mind the website, it's what's behind the shop window, right? There's no point making a shop window that says X, Y, and Z, we do this, that, and the other. And then when somebody comes in, it's totally different. And I think that's what you're saying. It's very easy for some organizations externally to say, we care about the environment, we do this, we've seen it with the whole DI rollback and all of that. I think I heard somebody on the news say, organizations that literally 6 months ago were like, this is the most important thing to us, all of a sudden are like moonwalking back out of those statements that literally were everything to them like a year ago, right?
The performative measures, right, that they put in place. And for me, I am actually, and it sounds really strange and a bit weird, I'm actually quite grateful that these organizations are speaking up about how much they don't care about inclusion and how they're stepping back, because it gives us a warning sign and a red flag that this is probably a space that I don't want to commit my career to. It's not somewhere where I want to gift my skills. And those who are genuinely encouraging around inclusion, you can't just switch off overnight. It doesn't matter what your leadership team or your shareholders say. But if you are a truly inclusive leader who cares about the people that they work with and cares about creating a culture where everyone can thrive and not just survive, you're going to continue doing that anyway. You don't need a policy to tell you to do that. You don't need a program to tell you to do that. So those individuals will continue being the inclusive leader that they are, that they know brings great stuff. And those who turn it off tomorrow were ingenuine anyway. So
you're right. And it reminds me of there's a book called The Brave Leader, I think it is David McQueen's book, and there is something here about bravery and courage when it comes to this authenticity in terms of your communication and your external PR that organizations put out there versus what's going on inside the organization. Good morning, Hardev. How are you doing? There is a lot, isn't there? There is a lot to think about, and particularly given where we are at the moment. And one of the things I wanted to talk about, obviously, you're president of the Chartered Institute of PR, and I mean, at the moment, there are a lot of incredibly difficult and tricky topics. Some topics we don't even tend to discuss very much on LinkedIn. Some topics get kind of squashed by the algorithm if you try to discuss on LinkedIn. And it's the same in organizations, I think. I did a poll last weekend about whether or not people think we should avoid talking politics at work. And I was actually a little bit surprised that it was kind of 50-50, that some people said, we should be able to talk about it. And then, half the people sort of said, we should probably avoid it. And so there are these difficult topics, whether it comes to things like politics or global conflict, wars, specific hate crimes, all of that sort of thing. And often companies are looked to make a response or not. We think about the whole George Floyd thing and all of that. There was, all of the black squares and everything. What are your thoughts about how companies should respond, both internally and or externally, when there are these really tricky situations going on in the world?
Yeah. I mean, silence can feel like indifference, and especially when people are emotionally impacted by whatever's happening out there.
Yeah.
But it's also really important to remember that performative statements don't work either. And this is what we saw around George Floyd, where we had these organizations putting out these bold statements about how they're going to improve the lives of Black folks in the US and globally.
Yeah.
A load of BS, right? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Based on the data set that we eventually that were shared and stories that came out. I would say that first of all, it has to be a psychologically safe space for anyone to be able to discuss tricky subjects, and organizations to do this by listening to their colleagues and employees, but also to the communities that are around them, and understanding the context. And often they have a knee-jerk reaction and feel that they're getting left behind, or should say something and put something out there that isn't meaningful. And when they do speak and then they do learn, it has to come from a place of compassion and clarity. And there has to be consistency in what they're saying, because you can't just do one hit statement and think, right, okay, we've done it, we're fixed. It has to be consistent with their values, and it has to make sense to their colleagues, and it has to be safe in order for colleagues to be open about some tricky subjects out there. And silencing people when they want to talk about it is not the right thing either. But the red flags will show you. If people are quiet, they're withdrawn, and they're not speaking up about certain topics, then you need to be able to create that safe culture where they can, and you look towards the leadership, because no matter what you say, it's the leaders that define the culture. If the leaders are willing to have those open conversations in a space that everyone's allowed to share their thoughts and be educated, then people will do that. And it's externally, it's about showing that kind of humanity, right? And it's not about the headlines. And sometimes we get that, and we're focusing too much about the Daily Mail headline. What will they say? But think about the humanity, and remember that there isn't a size that fits all. And there's something that will fit you, and you have to know your organization and your community well in order to make a decision.
I love the way you distinguish it there in terms of we have to sort of like look internally at what the need is, and how the colleagues and employees and co-workers are feeling. And that's where, from my perspective, this is where like employee networks can play a really key role, or an inclusion forum or a belonging forum if you've got that kind of group. So the couple of the people that we've got on, they lead employee forums, so they can be a really good kind of sort of sounding point to kind of be like, well, how are people feeling? You talked about the compassion, clarity and consistency, which I love, in terms of when you think about what is needed internally. And then externally, one of the things I want to ask you, especially when it comes to external, is do you think that organizations always need to say something, or is your view that actually it's okay to sometimes not say something in terms of putting out an external statement or a press release or whatever? What are your thoughts around that?
I personally think that if they're silent because they're reflecting, learning, or are unsure of what to say, then that can be a powerful stance to say, right, listen, folks, let's just not rush into this. Let's have a chat. Let's figure out what it is that we want to say to the communities and our colleagues, and let's just be very meaningful and not performative in any of this. And it's and that's fine, while you're doing that work. But it's not okay to say nothing if you're trying to avoid discomfort. And if your values truly matter, and you care about the work that you're doing, and you want to back up that statement, then that should guide your response. I know, many organizations that haven't said anything because it's discomfort, it's uncomfortable. They don't want to. Then they'll use the excuses of, it's not our place, not our job. Rather, hang on a minute, our colleagues are crying out for something, or our community are asking for, our customers. what is it that we need to learn about this? What is it that we want to say about this? And even if that response is, we're still working through this, we're still working through about what this means for us. We're still talking to our colleagues and our people and our communities. And it's not always about having that perfect statement. And Priya and I, who I co-author the book with, always say progress, not perfect. And it isn't about that perfection. It's about having a vulnerable, transparent, honest statement that people will relate to. And I would say saying nothing needs to be a deliberate choice, and it has to be rooted in integrity, right? So say something, but it has to be rooted in integrity and not fear. And that's what
I love that. I love that. You said saying nothing needs to be a deliberate choice.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that because, but you're right in terms of it is often either rooted in a fear or just paralysis. There's just like, we're not sure, so we're just going to do nothing. We're not even necessarily like learning. We just like literally like a rabbit in headlights. Is how it sometimes comes.
Panic steps in. And it's what you said before, Cheryl. It's like, leaders do have a lot of responsibility nowadays. They've got a lot to take on board. And I feel a bit of, I feel bad for some of the leadership kind of backlash that they often get. And I know they are stuck between a rock and a hard place at times. And it is about understanding that and recognizing that and seeing like, what help do I need to help me out ridiculous spiral I've got myself into and this fear that I'm facing. Who are the experts, the specialists, the support around me to help me understand and navigate through this complexity that I'm facing right now?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that's interesting, and I just want to delve into this really slightly, because it's around the DEI backlash, because I heard somebody this week refer to it as what they were saying was some of the organizations, particularly in the States, obviously, think of like the tech companies and some of the other ones that have basically said, we are rolling back XYZ, or we are doing. He called it a strategic retreat. So what he was basically saying was almost like they've almost like had to come out and say these things because of the political climate. So he was calling it a strategic retreat. And then he also said, some organizations have deliberately chosen to be silent. So I think to the point that you're making, particularly in a situation like that, which is quite extraordinary actually, but there is something about, maybe there has actually been a discussion internally and the decision has been, we're not going to say anything, that is the best course of action. And in that situation, that may well be the best course of action, right? For something like that. So
definitely. And that's a deliberate choice that they're making, right? So they've had the conversation, they've listened to advice, feedback, colleagues, and they've chosen, right, it's not, we're not going to contribute to this noise. We're going to crack on and do what we do best. And we're just going to do it well. And that is absolutely okay. I don't feel that it is difficult when you're being pressured by shareholders and others, and it's a legality issue and the government is directing you to not say something, and you have to feel like you have to, especially when you've got a federal, in the US, you've got federal commitments and stuff like that. So I get it. But it is about you have to be deliberate, and it has to be tied in with integrity.
Yeah.
Whatever you decide to say.
Yeah. And I love what you said. You mentioned there's some of the specific stakeholders that an organization needs to think about. So obviously we've got, I think I was on this with somebody and they sort of summed it up as, colleagues, clients or customers and community. And obviously, we have got other things. The 3 C's, we've got shareholders, we've got, as you say, in the US, the government being a big player now in this space as well. But there is something about thinking all of those. And one of the things that somebody else once said to me, actually, in this space when it comes to comms in particular, and obviously, you'll know more about this than I do, but there's something about depending on the type of brand you are. So if you are, for example, a lifestyle brand that people bring into their homes, that ordinarily sort of like talk about these things. Do you know what I mean? Like you're more of a lifestyle brand. You may well be more expected to have a view on something or to say something about certain types of issues because they may be more closely aligned to your market or your sector or do you know what I mean? Are there those considerations as well that people need to make, Advita?
Yeah, it's about aligning to your values and your purpose. Like what are you here, what are you adding to the world and what do your customers want from you? And if you are one of those brands that talks quite openly about some topics, but then not others, people will judge you. And people will say that, hang on, you're quite comfortable talking about this, but now it comes to this, you're not talking about it. Just being, like I said, being mindful about who are you, what's your purpose, what are you trying to do, and what value are you bringing, and what are you doing to reassure your colleagues, your communities, and your customers and clients. And that's what you need to do. You need to have those chats, and this is why listening is incredibly important.
The listening. And what does that look like in terms of I know, for example, so a couple of the guys here that have employee networks, I know sometimes employee networks will sometimes do this sort of thing if, for example, something is going on. Say, for example, with the riots last year that happened in the UK, I know quite a few organisations held almost like, sort of like safe spaces or listening circles just for people to literally come in and talk about how they were feeling and what was going on. So is that the sort of thing that you're thinking of, or is it, focus groups with customers, or,
a mixture of all those kind of informal and formal listening exercises, right? So making the point of creating these safe circles and explaining what safe means, right? Because you can say like, oh, I'm creating a safe circle, but what does that actually mean? Like you won't be, you won't be penalized for speaking up about something. This is somewhere, it's all Chatham House rule here. You have to explain what that means. So you have the formal kind of, look, we're getting people together, we're going to have a conversation, we're going to do some education, and we're going to allow people to talk. Then you have the informal stuff, so walking the floor, picking up the phone, and having a chat with someone that you're not spoken to in a while, especially if you're a teammate and you've not heard from them or seen them, especially through a remote world. You have to be able to make a point of going in and asking, like, what's happening? I always say to leaders, one key question that you can ask your team is, what's the one thing that I can do to help you in your role and help you thrive? Like, what's missing here? That one simple question can transform that entire conversation. And listening, and there's active listening, right? So the coaches who are listening to this chat today will know that active listening is where you are tuned in and you're paying attention to what that individual is saying. And listening is distracting, and you're writing an email, you're thinking of your shopping, you're thinking about X, Y, Z, and you're just kind of being a bit dismissive. And people, the difference between the two. And I can't tell you how integral listening is to the decisions that you're making internally and when it comes to communication.
Do you know what? I'd totally forgotten about the benefits of, particularly for leaders, the benefits of a leader walking into an open plan office and just like having a wander around. I don't mean an orchestrated rural visit where people have gotten the paint. I don't mean that. I mean literally, a leader's working out of a certain office and they just spend literally 5 minutes just going around saying hello to a few people and talking to them. The benefits of that, if they're really listening, and as you say, asking the right questions as well, things like, what's the one thing I could do, to make, life easier or whatever. We've kind of lost that. And I feel some of that, with obviously the remote working as well. I hate to say it because I'm a big fan of choice and hybrid and work from home and all of that, but some of those informal listening opportunities are potentially lost, right, in this new kind of way of working. It kind of links with them. So Junior's put here, you can't have emotional connection with your customers if you're visibly disconnected, and that there is a real challenge. I mean, that the thing about the list that you said there about the listening, those things that happen when people walk the floor, and we will have worked in a time when we were used to that. Is there an equivalent? Is there a virtual equivalent of that?
Yeah, you have to be intentional with the virtual world. So yes, before the leader was in the as a colleague kitchen making a cup of tea, they would hear what's happening. They'd have how's it weekend, and that emotional connection that Junior spoke about. That's where the challenges are starting, right? Because you get to know people through that connection, and when you don't have that connection, that's where bias and stereotypes come in play. And then when it's all business and no emotional connection, you become distant from that person and you start making assumptions, and that's where conflict starts. And it's hybrid, and I'm with you. I'm all about choice, but I also feel I am also about connection. So you have to be very intentional with your remote or hybrid, and you have to carve in more times where you can get the group together and just have a chat about stuff that is relevant to the work, as you would if you're having those water cooler moments in the office. And we just don't do that. As soon as you get on Zoom or Teams, it goes it. Agenda item, blah blah blah. Right, next one. It's like a line. It just
it's when we get onto Zoom and Teams, it's just all task. It's just task. Yeah, I mean, the one thing I will say as well, and I think I'm maybe going to do a LinkedIn Live about this, but it's one thing I say to the sort of people that are involved in employee network leads and people that, you know, coming back to what you said right at the top of this conversation was sometimes the pressure that you feel when you're the only one, right? You're the only whatever it be in the room. But the tough love that I sometimes say to those individuals is get yourself in the office, right?
Yeah.
If you want to build connection, because it's harder if you are in the underrepresented group, right? It can be harder to build relationships unless you are a master at doing it virtually, you know, as you say, unless you've kind of got it down to a T. So unless you've got your Zoom or your Teams patter absolutely down, get yourself in the office. Get yourself in the office. Start finding out where, you know, key and influential people are going to be, and find yourself at the coffee machine or in the kitchen when they're in there, and start talking to people. Is some of the tough love that I sometimes get to.
With it. I was a right strategic mover when I worked in house. You have to be when you don't belong to the dominant culture, and you can often be ignored or misrepresented. You have to put yourself out there more than what others might do, and it's unfair. I know it is. I understand completely, but if you want to make an impact, sometimes you do have to go above and beyond in certain places until they recognize your contribution and value.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm totally with you. And obviously that's the advice that we give to individuals, and then to organizations, we sort of stress the organizations that they need to understand those challenges, and that's the work that we do with the organizations, right? So we're going to wrap things up. This has been brilliant, and we're going to talk some more. And to anybody that's watching, Junior, you're in my to-do list of people I need to talk to, so I'll be in touch shortly, because I'm looking potentially for some more people to do some live stuff with. I've got a secret project that I'm working on. So Junior, I will be in touch, and Advita, we're going to talk about this after we come off here. But just I'd really love to leave people with one thing. So if somebody's watching this at the moment, maybe they work in internal comms, or they work, with employee networks, so they're kind of working side by side with internal comms. What's the one thing organizations can do to improve their approach to communications, whether it's internal or external?
Do you know what, Cheryl? I'm going to go back to listening. I can't stress enough how important this activity is. Really hearing about what's going on with other people in terms of inclusion, belonging, and trust. What does it mean? There's so much noise, so much distraction, so much misinformation, disinformation out there. We need to, as communication professionals, be able to connect and have conversations with individuals about what they're hearing, what they're seeing, and dispel some of that disinformation and misinformation that's out there, and work with our leaders to be able to communicate well and bring that psychological safe space that we often talk about. And we can only really do that when we know what the problem is. And we only ever know what the problem is when we listen, and we listen to what they're really saying to us. So I will go back to that and say, as a communication professional, or whatever professional, HR, communication, leader, operational, tune into listen. If you feel stuck and you feel that we're not making the traction we want to make, go back to listening.
Yeah, I love that. Because it just reminds me of that saying, people sort of say, oh, we've got two ears and one mouth, right? So when it comes to communication, we often think about, oh, what is it that we need to say? What do we need to say? What do we need to write? But, I absolutely second what you've said. And I wasn't expecting us to end there, but I think you're absolutely right. Listening, because then what needs to be said. If anything, actually, the response might be silence. As you were saying, listening. Good morning, Peace. Thank you so much for listening in, and that's it for today. Thank you, Advita, so much for joining us. Communication is such an important topic. Can be very difficult to get right, and organizations, as we said before, often do get criticism, almost like no matter what they do, you say something, they get criticized. You don't say something, there's criticism. So some really useful gems that you've dropped here, compassion, clarity, and consistency, especially when it comes to how we look at communications that are internal. Yeah, I just absolutely loved it. And listening, I think if people only remember the one thing, listening, yeah,
and be bold, be bold, be
yeah,
brave, put yourself out there and ask those curious questions.
yeah,
Don't ever feel that you can't ask questions. We need to be asking more questions, and we need to be listening. And with a CommsRebel mindset, be bold and try and go outside of that kind of status quo sometimes that we're pushed into, because that's how we're going to make the change and make a difference.
Yeah. Brilliant. Love it. Advita, thank you so much for joining us. If people want to connect with you and find out more about the work that you do, where can they find you? Where's the best place to connect with you?
Well, you can LinkedIn. I'm always on there. Check something about something or another. Or you can visit my website, which is just CommsRebel.com.
Yeah. And what's your podcast called? Did I?
Building a culture of inclusivity. So a leader like me. So if you search for a leader like me on anywhere where you listen to your podcast, you'll find
it. A leader like me. And the book is building a culture of inclusivity as well.
And we actually have an Audible version of the book coming out in about 2 weeks. So it's just going through the process. So if you're a listener rather than a reader, then Audible and other Spotify places like that will have the book as well.
Oh, audiobooks is where I live.
Me too.
You can't write a book these days and not have an audiobook. You've got to have an audiobook. I keep saying it to all authors. You have got to have an audiobook. Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. Yeah. So so be looking. So did you say the audiobook is out already, or it's coming out?
It's gone through it's gone on the platforms, and then now going through approval. So it should be about 2 weeks.
Amazing.
I'll be sharing when it's out on my LinkedIn.
Are you going to have an audiobook launch?
Do you know what? I might do.
Yeah.
Why not? Yes.
Do that.
Audible audiobook launch. Yeah, we will. Yeah, definitely. When Priya and I were reading it out, we realised it's so relevant to what's going on in the world right now. So hopefully it'll be a piece of learning.
Definitely. And it's just an opportunity to kind of, remind people of the conversation and. Yeah, for sure. After all of that work, Did you narrate it yourself?
Yes. And who would have thought reading out loud would have been a really fun task?
I know. How long did it take you?
3 days. So 6 days in, 3 days for me and 3 days for Priya. But reading out loud is definitely a skill that I underappreciated.
It is, isn't it?
A lot about myself, about how I pronounce words, how I can pronounce.
Yeah, how you breathe.
Every little stomach a little bit of a sniffle, we breathe. Honestly, it's
crazy.
But I'm an audiobook fan. I really want to do it. I know lots of people prefer audiobooks. So we're really chuffed that we managed to get it over the line.
Amazing. Perfect. Well, we'll be looking out for that to come out on audiobook soon. Advita, thank you so much for joining us, honestly. And thank you to everyone that's joined us live. I know there's a couple of people on YouTube as well. Thank you for joining us. And if you're watching this on the replay, the replay, thank you for taking out, sort of nearly 40 minutes of your day to listen to this, and hope it was useful. And if you've got any more questions, please do get in touch with myself, but obviously Advita, as the expert in this area, will be able to help you. Thank you all. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Next week, Thursday. I'm live on Thursday because it's Good Friday next week. So Thursday morning, 8:30. Ciao.